Good morning everyone, and a very warm welcome to our first ever National RYA Cruising Conference. Certainly feels like an opportune time to be hosting it, as all forms of boating in England will be permitted once again from next week in the return to outdoor sport on the 29th of March. So let's hope for a great Easter weekend as a kickstart for an epic summer of boating. On my wish list for 2021 is many happy afternoons, sailing in glorious sunshine, spotting dolphins and seals, whether I'm off Falmouth or Harwich, pottering around boatsaining, inviting the neighbouring boat over for a glass of wine, remember that? And figuring how to conjure up tasty meals for a week from a small galley with no fridge. But I'm also determined to try a couple of the new dinghy cruising trails this year, and maybe add some new ones. The River Deben and the upper reaches of the Tamar are definitely both beckoning. But frankly, I'd settle for being holed up in the cabin of my friend's motor cruiser on a wet, windy day with a coffee, playing Uno. Basically, I can't wait to get back on the water. The positive news is just how many people are getting the boating bug at the moment. The restrictions in place last year meant a whole new class of 2020 rediscovered the delights of sailing and motorboating all around the UK. And with staycations still firmly on the agenda for 2021, that's got to be great for cruising. We're really lucky to have such a wealth of fantastic destinations to explore in this country. Whether it's beautiful anchorages or friendly marinas, we have a huge variety of inland and coastal environments to explore. And of course, it's not just about the boating itself, but the great walks and local history to discover, visiting cosy pubs, or maybe doing a bit of bird watching. We're also fortunate in our cruising community itself. My experience is people are always quick to help out, whether it's with mooring lines, tips on where to get the best fish and chips, and I love the mix of motor and sail in the marinas. Far from being a divide, we have so much in common and so much to learn from one another. Of course, cruising this summer is going to look very different. The combination of COVID and Brexit is sure to guarantee that. But any reports of the death of cruising are greatly exaggerated, as the saying goes. Actually, us boaters were arguably better prepared than most to deal with lockdown and the challenges of COVID restrictions. After all, cruising is basically all about the process of stockpiling tinned food, then spending long periods cooped up in a small space with others, making our own entertainment by playing games, having to do seemingly endless DIY, all while wearing the same pair of tatty trousers and flip-flops all week. The effort of having to focus on safety protocols due to being surrounded by an innately dangerous environment, but all whilst knowing that the end destination is definitely going to be worth the journey. Sounds a lot like 2020 to me, but maybe I've just been doing it wrong. The real impact of Brexit is only just starting to play out in terms of how it will affect us. There are some critical impacts, such as how long we can spend in EU countries without a permanent visa, which qualifications and documentation will be recognised for recreational and commercial use in the EU, and the complex taxation rules surrounding the import and export of yachts. Certainly, we are already feeling the impact in RYA operations. Ordinary processes such as dispatching books to a member or sharing information with a recognised training centre now have to be rethought if either are based in Europe. The labyrinth is particularly difficult to unravel for RYA clubs and members in Northern Ireland, and early experience has cast doubt on even simple activities like provisioning for a cross-channel trip after homemade sandwiches were confiscated at the Dutch border. Personally, I suspect there will be a period of adjustment on both sides, with perhaps more stringent enforcement in the near future before things settle down a bit and we all find our new normal. I suspect I'm not the only person on the call today who can remember how it used to be, flying a Q flag, needing to present documents at the Capitainery. That was simply part of the experience. What Brexit undoubtedly means is that it's now more important than ever to embrace the unique community of the sea and welcome all those intrepid French, Dutch, Belgian, German, Irish, any other visiting yachts. Politics has no place in boating. You've got a great agenda today with celebrated adventurers and world-class experts to update and inspire you. Stuart and Howard are here to tell you everything you ever needed or wanted to know on red diesel, post-Brexit immigration protocols, returned goods relief, and much, much more. And Skip Novak has generously agreed to share some of his incredible high latitude experiences and some useful tips for how these might help us more conventional boaters get more out of our cruising. So, I shan't detain you much longer, but I do have a couple of important thank yous. Firstly, to Robbie Bell, to Hannah and everyone in the team for all of your hard work in pulling together today's event. To Bishop Skinner for their continued support, and most importantly to our title sponsors B&G. I can personally attest to the quality and reliability of their products, and we're delighted that they're focusing more on cruising. I wanted to end by thanking each one of you for your attendance today, for your support and continued membership. The RYA may be a large and professional organisation, but we are at heart very much a members association, and we exist because of you and the many tens of thousands of others. I know how tough it's been for so many, and I sincerely wish every one of you the best season on the water that you have ever enjoyed in 2021. See you out there.
Thank you very much to Sarah for your insight. Next up, we'll be joined by Skip Novak. Skip is a veteran of 4 Whitbread round-the-world races, various multi-hull ocean racing campaigns, and perhaps most appropriately for today, a hugely experienced sailing adventurer and an authority on polar sailing.
So Stephen, how is this compared to climbing?
It's much harder work. The mountain keeps still generally.
Oh, you want the rudder to be still?
It's nice, it certainly makes you feel better.
Early morning. What's the plan?
Well, the plan is, as we say in South Africa, we're going to make a plan, which means we really don't know what we're going to do yet, but we have a vague idea. We're motoring down the coast now. We just came in from offshore, 4 days out of Stanley with a strong southwest, with a little bit of more icing than I had thought. So there was continuous sea spray flying over the boat, so we've got a lot of ice on board. We've already chipped it out 3 times yesterday, and now we're going to seek shelter in one of the bays down here about 50 miles up, and then have a big chipping session, trying to get all the ice off the deck, rig the anchor obviously, anchor for the rest of the day, and spend the night there, have a nice leg of lamb, one of those guys in the back there, defrost that, and then get the dinghy out and rig for inshore, and then make our way down south tomorrow to try to establish the climbing team down in Larsen Harbor or Trollhjul at the south end of the island.
Greetings from Cape Town. I hope you can all hear me there. Sunny morning here. That little clip there, of course, sailing in this fashion is not everybody's cup of tea. I can understand that, but it is in aid of demonstrating in a somewhat dramatic fashion the point of this presentation, which to do these types of activities at sea and cruising in general, you must try to keep things simple on your vessel. And this philosophy trickles down from South Georgia winter right down to cruising in the Caribbean or anywhere in the world, really. Next slide, please. Right, as many of you know, we are a chartered company with 2 expedition vessels, the 54-foot Pelagic steel hull and the bigger Pelagic Australis, 74-foot aluminium. And this is soon to be augmented with the new Pelagic 77, just launched at KM Yachts in Holland a few weeks ago. Next slide, please. And there she was, rigs going in. And this is quite funny, like this virtual presentation, I've been fitting out this vessel, which is called, by the way, Vincent of Antarctica, a bit long-winded, but reasons for it. And we've been doing that all by Zoom and WhatsApp because I've been stuck in Cape Town, and it's not in any way, shape, or form as enjoyable as being there for the fit out of something like this. That's the part I really enjoy. After you've done all the design work and all the planning, you can actually tell the shipyard where to install the paper towel holder in the galley, and amongst other things. You can imagine my frustration. But note that this vessel will be in the Hamble, home of the RYA, in May. Hopefully I'll be there as well. So if you are in the area, please come down and have a look. And I certainly invite everybody from the RYA office to come down for a cup of tea. Next slide, please. And that's Pelagic in a sunny day in South Georgia there. That was a couple of years ago, and we did yet another Shackleton traverse. Next slide, please. Right. Okay. We've been in the high latitude business for 33 years now, doing back-to-back charters for a 9-month season that runs from September to May, with very little time in between charters. And I can say, honestly, that I think our biggest reason for success is the whole operating these vessels dead simply with terms of systems, and it really verges on primitive by modern yacht standards, I can say, from what I see. And this is now from soon to be a 3-boat evolution with the new boat coming on stream. And I would have to say, as an accolade, we've got an action-packed record of accomplishments in the mountains and film projects and science projects and all the rest of it. And we've had very little downtime, almost none, due to breakages or equipment failures on this very intensive schedule. Next slide, please. And I guess, to start off, when you go cruising worldwide or anywhere really, you have to ask yourself, why are we going cruising in the first place? A case can be made for the love of the boat itself, which could result in an over-elaborated boat for the sake of it. Nothing wrong with that. And maybe one that is maintenance intensive for aesthetic purposes, lots of varnish work, for example. And this is where the boat becomes the objet d'art, and it's the principal point of interest. This is not a bad thing in itself, to be honest. But if you, like me, are cruising and voyaging to see places and do things on shore, get on shore and see the land, then in effect your boat is like a taxi to Exotica, and then you have to think again and try to avoid too many compromises and making your life difficult. Next slide, please. This is a nice photo of the beginning of the Shackleton route on South Georgia. I think this one was in 2009. We've done about 5 of those now with client groups. And you probably can't see it in the photograph, but in that little island there in dead center is Pelagic Australis. We're about to give them a radio call to say, yes, we're all okay. Nobody's forgotten anything in their rucksack, and they can motor around to the other side of the island. And this is the case where you can leave the vessel. Next slide, please. And there's me leading up that first snowfield, and it's a 6-hour trek up to the first camp. And I've got no worries about the boat because it's all sorted, good crew, everything's working, and I know it better be because it's got to pick us up in about 5 days' time on the other side of the island at the whaling station. So, this is liberty. This is, freedom of the hills, which can be freedom of anywhere on shore where you don't have to worry about the boat. You get these situations where over-elaborated cruising boats, people struggle to do things and get away from the boat to see something inland, to go traveling, because there's always a mega work list of things to fix. Isn't that true? The mountaineer, founder of the Patagonia Outdoor Company and self-confessed minimalist, Yvon Chouinard, is quoted in his book, Let My People Go Surfing. It's a hell of a good read. And he says this: consider every piece of technology that comes your way and accept only what is absolutely necessary and disregard the rest. I don't think Chouinard was a Luddite. He was in fact an inventor. But he was speaking about how to lead an unencumbered, happy life, something that for me has always been a given. Chouinard's philosophy certainly applies to a mountaineer who must carry everything on his back. The dilemma for us yachtsmen is we travel in our floating cocoon, which has space to fill, and fill it can. I remember having a look around a 60-footer from a well-known UK production boat builder years ago, and they were touting their craft as the ultimate blue water cruisers. I like to open lockers and snoop around when I go on a boat, and in this case, which is endemic with the brand and most of its competitors worldwide, almost every locker and cupboard had a bank of relays, if not a transformer, or a control box, if not a pump, then a wiring loom that would not be out of place on a nuclear submarine. There was little or no place to put provisions, so I was dumbfounded on where exactly they intended to go. Of course, all this out of view tech supported all sorts of gadgetry and conveniences, which really is arguable in order to enjoy one's time afloat. Does a 50-footer really need a dishwasher and a trash compactor? Would not a bucket and some clothespins do the same job as a washing machine and a dryer? I don't know. That's how we do it. The implications are always the same. To enjoy yourself and concentrate on the objectives, that is to explore. This means simplicity in systems that are easy to service. But when they fail, as everything does eventually, this average skipper, an owner with average skills, can make repairs. For me, this means keeping everything manual as possible. Why have an electric pump when a hand pump will do? Even more important is electrics and electronics, which most of us are not trained to deal with other than basic circuitry. Let's face it, most people's eyes glaze over when they open the back of a circuit breaker panel. Next slide, please. Yeah, and this is another one about manual systems. I've surely pushed manual sail control systems to the limit with Pelagic Australis at 74 feet. We have all manual winches, manual furlers, and that's not the norm at all. But I'll argue with anyone if they think it is more satisfying to push a button instead of being temporarily out of breath winding a winch. Of course, electric winches have their place to aid some people's infirmities, and of course, as you get older, you may have to resort to that. But to see otherwise healthy individuals sailing a 45-footer with electric winches is a bit sad, in my opinion. Sorry about that. Let's not forget this is an outdoor activity, if not considered a sport, okay? Next two slides, please, with a few seconds in between. That's on the way to South Georgia once again. And this is, we get our clients involved in sailing the boat, winding winches, everybody's involved, and they all love it. Even if we have boat owners, of course, as well, that do have electric winches and they actually enjoy the workout. One more. And then sometimes that does go to extremes. This was on the way to the South Sandwich Islands last year, southeast of South Georgia, doing a multifaceted science project. And that's Ted Cheeseman. He's deploying his sonic listening device for whale noise. Ted was the founder of Happy Whale, logging humpback whale tails on a database with an algorithm identification. And he had a half a kilometer of spectral rope there. Next slide, please. And of course, he had to put that out every day. Then we had to retrieve it at the end of the day, and to bring in a half a kilometer of rope was quite tricky. So we had everybody involved, and we had a great time. And you could have an electric winch, granted, but I can imagine the snarl-ups on a thing like that. Next slide, please. Now, Vincent of Antarctica at 77 feet. Quite a bit bigger volume. She's 77 gross tons. And not surprisingly, I've kept this to a manual system, manual furlers, manual winches throughout, but we had to go to split rig to divide up the sail areas. And this boat is going to be multi-purpose. It's going to chartering under my brand Pelagic, but it's also going to be doing some sail training in Chile for underprivileged kids, because the owner of the vessel, a Chilean colleague of mine, supports these charities. So you need, for a sail training, absolutely, you need more strings to pull. I mean, I know that the modern philosophy now is have less control systems and less ropes and all those messy lines on the deck and all the rest of it. We've gone the other way with more things to do, basically. We love that. Next slide, please. And that's Vincent of Antarctica there. And yeah, it's going to be a great boat. Next slide, please. Right, and I put that slide in there to demonstrate, you know, I'm afraid to say I've evolved into a seagoing antichrist in this regard. And I get the distinct impression that when designers, builders, and equipment suppliers hear my name, they either run for cover, cringe, or laugh in their beer. It's no surprise, though, as designers are there to innovate. Same for builders, and suppliers are there to sell stuff. The dilemma comes when buying a production boat or commissioning a custom one-off. The buyer is at the mercy of, at times, coercive forces aiming to enhance the vessel with things they say you can't do without. I mean, how often have we been there? Huh? For a customer of a production boat, there are loads of options, and you have to be pretty strong-willed to refuse most of them when pressure comes on to bear by so-called experts. When we started out with Pelagic, that's a photo from right in the beginning, our first trip south in 1988, and we had nothing on board, basically, because we were broke, myself and the two partners, and we conjured this thing up out of thin air. So we started very simple by definition, but you know what? I mean, we haven't changed much on the boat. We have put a furler on the front stay, and we've got a better autopilot now. But my advice is to start out simple. If you're going to build a boat or buy a production boat, don't take the options. That stuff can be added later, most by and large. One of my heroes in this sailing and climbing game was H.W. Tillman, a mountain explorer, but a very suspect sailor, had plenty of fiascos at sea. And he often repeated the axiom, conveniences are never missed where they were never enjoyed. I love that one. Next slide, please. This is a case in point. Certainly, water makers, you must have one in the tropics and high latitudes. You know, that's a given. But if you sail, you know, far north, far south, there's literally water everywhere. And I sort of quite humorous when you see people in southern Chile with their water maker going and they complaining because they need a spare part, etc. And we take water off waterfalls everywhere in Tierra del Fuego and the Chilean coast. Pull the boat up, get some lines ashore so she's right angled to a stream, run your hose up with a funnel up the stream there, down in the tanks, and have lunch while the tanks are charging. It's great fun. Next slide, please. Again, gets people active. You know, this is an active, sailing for me is active. It's not a passive thing. We have a water maker now mainly for our transatlantic deliveries, but we continue to even if we have it, we like to charge from the streams and waterfalls and the glacial runoff. Next slide, please. View from top down, right in the trees. Next slide, please. In the old days, before the climate change in Antarctica, we've got a spike of about 2 degrees warmer than it was when we went down there. We had to collect ice, glacial ice from the sea, corral it in the dinghy, hoist it up with a halyard, chop it up with an ice axe, put it in a big barrel down below on top of the engine box, and melt it down for our fresh water. You know, I mean, this was great stuff. You know, we love it. Okay, I don't expect everyone in this audience to buy into my retro philosophies here and methods, but I speak from my own experience and from many years of observation that the sailors in their boats that have less distractions of what we call gadgets and gilhickeys and more emphasis on the bare essentials of surviving have accomplished the most in their cruising and seem to be the most contented. Next slide, please. This is now in Antarctica, 1988. We were gathering hard ice because everything was frozen. Nowadays, the glacial runoff, there's water streaming down the glaciers everywhere. So we have to collect this in in 60-liter barrels and lighter them out to the boat, hoist them up with a halyard. It's a half-a-day job to charge on the big boat, 2,500 liters. We get everybody involved, and it's yet another interesting thing to do. Next slide, please. And then there's, of course, the ice for the whiskey and the pisco sours. I mean, that's a beauty. That's 10,000-year-old glacial ice that we hook out everywhere we can. The second thing that I'd like to emphasize with over-elaboration generally in the marine industry, that's me, is loss of skills, loss of some basic skills. And, you know, this is definitely, I would say, technology creep here. And also, you know, navigational skills as well, slightly gone by the board because we've got so much really good electronics around, and the stuff is getting better and better. It is great. We all use it. But I'd like to see a little bit less looking into the screen. We probably all of us need to do a lot less of that, and more honing your observational skills on deck, and, you know, really going back to some basic principles and not forgetting those basic principles. Things like taking a running fix off a lighthouse, which I think has fallen away from the RYA syllabus, sadly. Okay, I don't want to demonstrate this, I just want to read a few excerpts from an article I did from my Yachting World column, which most of you probably have heard all these things before, but this is from September 2018, and this is a good example of what I'm talking about here. Just when I started to agonize over a topic for this next column with a deadline on the horizon, a windfall materialized, a subject that was irresistible. Volvo announced recently they have developed and tested the technology enabling self-docking of yachts. They proved this by squeezing a motorboat in between two Volvo 65s in Gothenburg at the end of the Round the World race, and it was done hands-off. The idea, so explained the Volvo engineer on YouTube, is to remove the stress of these tricky situations. Another video clip then popped up that said something to the effect that you can buy a $9 million yacht, but you can't buy the skill to bring it in. How true. What will we in our collective wisdom think of next? Of course, marinas around the world are full to the bursting point. Space is at a premium. Boats seem to be getting larger, not smaller. The technology addresses the need of this thing. But I have to remain nervous in my skepticism, as I've done with driverless cars, where technology is pulling down our skills base. Our senses are being sacrificed to sensors, not to mention we are sacrificing the pleasure of hands-on control. And safety, we are only just beginning to realize the pitfalls of driverless cars. There's also a trickle-down effect. Self-docking technology of big motor yachts will eventually arrive as standard kit on small to medium-sized sail and powerboats. If in doubt, witness that bow thrusters, granted necessary on a big super yacht, are almost standard equipment on boats as small as 45-footers. The result, a loss of those seamanship skills of bringing a boat into a dock or onto a buoy by gauging the wind and tide, and getting the boat tacked down smartly. But there's another part of this story which is slightly amusing. Anyone who has been to St. Bart's Bucket in the Caribbean and watched the captains and crews maneuver the fleet of sailing super yachts stern to the dock with a fresh Caribbean breeze side on, with centimeters to spare between them, it's nothing short of impressive. What a shame to relegate this spectacle to a non-event, assuming this self-docking technology becomes more or less reliable. One more photo, please. Can we change the photo, please? Thank you. For those on shore, the attraction in watching docking maneuvers is in anticipating the unexpected. Euphemism for the possibility of a right balls up. This is simply human nature. The Germans Schadenfreude, admiring excellence but admonishing incompetence. In yachting is as natural as it is in watching any sporting event. Every time a boat is about to dock, you naturally drop what you are doing and prop yourself up into a comfortable position to enjoy the show, don't you? The explorer Bill Tillman, again, no stranger to maritime fiascos, described this very well back in 1955 when trying to leave the quay at Punta Arenas, pictured here with Pelagic, with his Bristol Channel pilot cutter Mischief. They managed to drop a jib over the side, went aground when the engine quit, and then were rammed by a Chilean cruiser trying to help. Tillman, quoted in the book, says, "It was a Saturday afternoon, and one could almost hear the happy sigh of the crowd as they realized how wise they had been to spend it on the jetty." I love that one. I've got my own story of a docking maneuver which had slightly better outcome. Next slide, please. This is back in my antediluvian racing career, 1985, skippering drum on the round the world race, pre-capsize, mind you. We unfortunately spun off our propeller while trialing in the Solent. Thought nothing of sailing back into the dock at Hamble Yacht Services. I know this is now illegal. Running downwind and tied with a full main, and I got the turn just right. The crew dumped the main and we slid alongside our competitor in the maxi class, the Belgian vessel Côte d'Or. Next slide. Recognize that guy. Eric Taberley was on deck to watch the show and catch our lines. As we snugged her down, he simply gave me a nod. I'll never forget it. What a great moment, great moment. So I'm going to leave you now with this encouragement to sail to the dock if allowed. Sail to your anchorage. Pick up your hook and sail off your anchorage. Because when that engine doesn't start, and one day it won't, you may have to. Thanks very much.
Hi, Skip. Thank you so much for that talk and really lovely photos there for everyone to look at. I've got a few questions, if you don't mind me asking you 2 or 3.
Okay, as long as they're easy. Okay.
They're easy, I promise. So the first one that we've had in is, I mean, you're obviously, you've been working and sailing in high altitude expeditions for many years now, but what's next? What have you got up your sleeve? What projects are coming up that you can tell us about?
Well, I think, you know, with this new vessel, we're going to, because it is a privately owned vessel that I'll be managing and brokering charters for, but the emphasis is not going to be so much on tourist charters, more on educational things like supporting film teams for, you know, environmental films, wildlife films, things like that, and also science projects, which there are a lot of now where this vessel will be very suited for. And obviously the sail training for the young people in Chile interests me. So it's a bit more of an evolution from what we normally do. But of course, we will be doing some tourist trips as well to help pay the bills, because the object of the exercise is to zero out the expenses for the vessel on an annual basis.
Thank you, Skip. We're having a few more questions come in. So a lady called Barbara, who's watched your presentation, has asked, how do you insulate the hull for polar waters?
Right, that's, you know, on the first boat, we didn't do it very well, and we had to redo the whole thing when we came back to Cape Town after year 1 in the Antarctic. And really the way to do it, if you can do it, because some places it's illegal to do this, is blown polyurethane foam over all the frames and stringers and cap all your exposed returns on your frames with a piece of plywood and blow the foam right up to the top of the plywood. We have 75 millimeter foam from below the floorboards right up over the overhead and the sides of the boat. And it's something you have to be meticulous about on your deck fastenings. If you can, if you have a metal boat, try to weld everything to the deck or weld everything on plinths with bottom tap bolts, as opposed to dropping fasteners through the boat, which is a wicking point. So it's a thing you have to spend a lot of time on to get right, to really avoid drips, condensation, and all the rest of it. And so the new boat, we've done a very good job. But blown foam is far superior than cutting out pieces of foam and sticking them in. And yeah, no doubt about it.
I expect you've got better over the years at doing that job.
We've gotten very good at it now.
I've got another technical question here from Steve, who's listening in as well. And he's asked, what do you use for self-steering, electronic system or a wind vane?
We're all electronic nowadays. We still have a wind vane on the little boat. The big boat is really too big for a wind vane. So we've got, on my present boat, Pelagic Australis, we got a very fishing boat quality, double rammed autopilot driven by Ray Marine, but it's a commercial hydraulic system. The new boat is going to be a Jetta system put in by KM Yachts. But I think, you know, small boats, 50 foot and below, a wind vane is a good backup to have to your electronic system. Like everything on these boats, redundancy. Everything should have a redundancy involved in the primary systems.
Yeah, I think we've learned that this morning as well when we had a little bit of a technical difficulties
Right,
here.
yeah. You guys did very well in salvaging that one.
We're back up and running thanks to the team working very hard.
Yeah.
So Michael has asked, do your boats always have a central wheelhouse?
The Pelagic Australis has a wheel inside, a hydraulic driven wheel, which we tend not to use that often. So on the bigger boat, on Vincent of Antarctica, we've eliminated that one. And we simply have a wheel outside, cable driven, very, very standard. We're twin rudder on that boat as well, and twin engine on Vincent of Antarctica. And then we've got just a joystick for the autopilot down below in the pilot house.
Loads of questions coming in here. Sorry, Skip. So
Okay.
Martin has asked, how long for the new craft from vision to sail? What was the duration of the design and build project?
Design and build was about design was about 6 months, and build, we were looking at 18 months. So yeah, it's a 2-year project, to conceiving this thing and getting it sorted, and we did with Tony. It's a Tony Castro design again, like Pelagic Australis, and of course everything was on the new boat, 3D modeled, which is really the way to go. And that's something when you go to a builder that you've got a 3D model design where you've looked at every single fiddle and shelf and space. I mean, the last thing the builder wants to hear is that you want to change something. So you really got to do a lot of effort on the design phase. And we had the headset, where you could actually walk through the boat and check out spatial arrangement. So when you get to the build stage, you press the button on that, CAD program, and bang, they cut out everything. Everything's laser cutting out, woodwork, everything, the whole thing. So, the last thing you want to do is try changing things during the build. Better to do it later after you've signed off.
Perfect preparation before you start building.
Absolutely.
So Richard has asked, is the new boat aluminium or steel, and which do you prefer?
The new boat's aluminium. Aluminium, if you really want to know the truth, a steel boat is the preferable boat for high latitudes. There's no question about that. You can treat it a lot rougher. You can hit more ice. You can run aground with impunity more often, et cetera, et cetera. But the problem with steel is, you've got to coat it. You've always have corrosion problems, this type of thing. Aluminium is much preferred from a maintenance point of view, and that all these high latitude boats, it's all bare aluminium now, and KM's a specialist at that type of construction. You don't want paint. You don't want to mess with paint work on the outside. Just forget it. What's the point? So aluminium. If you go aluminium, you got to build it a bit stronger than you would do normally for a high lat or a mid latitude boat. Closer frame spacing, heavier plate, make it a bit more bomb proof. But I prefer aluminium. But if I really want to do something creative, and because my little boat's smaller, small is counterintuitive, is actually a better thing in high latitudes. The smaller the better, because you can be a lot more creative navigationally, get yourself out of a jam easier. The bigger you are, the more careful you have to be.
Yeah. That was actually one of my questions I had written down is some advice for high latitude sailing. So small boat is good advice. A different Richard then has asked, and this could be quite a big question. He said, what do you consider to be the bare minimum gadgetry to have on board?
Yeah, that's a good one. Well, yeah, I mean, bare minimum gadgetry. Well, I'd say definitely, with a reasonably sized boat, 60 foot on down, no electric hydraulic winching systems or furlers. Everything's possible by hand. Other things down below, as I said, hand pump to pump out sinks, hand pump for a toilet. Why go with mechanical pumps that could fail and more difficult to replace and repair, etc. And you have to have a good heating system, obviously, and maybe a backup to that, because that's fundamental. But when you look at it, there's not really much you do need. You need to be warm, comfortable, dry down below, some fluffy cushions, and what more do you want? I mean, a lot of these boats I see, they have more gadgets than that you would find in the houses of people who own these things. I mean, it's very strange.
We've got a message here, actually. It's more of a message than a question, but it's from Kaz or Karen. And she's just said that there's some wonderful memories of her time on Pelagic Australis as crew. And it was and still is one of the best experiences of her life. So that's a really nice message.
Hi, Kaz. Thank you very much for that. Appreciate it. Yeah, we've had some amazing crew on the boat. Teams we try to keep a team on board for 3 seasons. And we got a lot of our crews from Che Blythe's Global Challenge, and now we get a lot of our crews from Robin's Clipper Race, and they're all RYA trained up, obviously, Ocean Yacht Masters. We've had, because the success of this charter operation, as I said, it's the simple systems, etc., but more so really when you're talking about the people side, it's the caliber of the crew. And there's lots of good sailors around, but it's the sailors who can actually handle non-sailors on board, people who think they're sailors, and meld them into a team, because everything we do is a team. It's not a charter situation where we have a crew and guests. It's once they step on board, it's the team on board, and that's the skill of my crews, is to do that, and they do it very well.
Amazing. I'm sure that's what Kaz has remembered, being part of that team. So a good question here from Denisa, might be Denise or Denisa. She's asking, Skip, what do you use for communication with the outside world when you're in the high latitudes?
Well, it depends on how high you go. We've got 2 systems, again, redundancy. We've got an Inmarsat Fleet 500 system, which takes us up to about 70 degrees north and about 65 degrees south, because that geostationary satellite is north of the equator, so you get a bit further north than you do further south. And that's our primary system. But if you go any more extreme than that, which we do, then you really have to go Iridium, because Iridium is global and polar orbiting satellites. So to have those 2 is good. The Fleet 500, is now internet-based, and that you have to have a very good optimizer because once you go online with that thing, you got to be very careful not to be downloading software updates for your PC, because that can get out of control. I've had several mistakes with that one. We'll get bills for thousands of dollars, which you don't know why for. But that's what we use, yeah. And Iridium, Iridium is evolving so quickly. They're putting up more satellites. I think if you just had to have one system, go with Iridium, especially if you don't want to send photographs, you don't want to send big files. Iridium is much the preferred option.
Thank you, Skip. We've got another question from Jolion. I don't know if I've said that right, so sorry. Simple question: how do you heat the boats?
Right, the global standards for heating systems, which you find on probably, I would say, 9 out of 10 vessels that do these type of things, is a reflex system. That's the name of the brand. It's a Danish fishing boat type unit. That's a burner pot diesel, runs off diesel, so we run it off our header tank, and it's a nice looking stainless steel cylinder. They come in different sizes. And it requires no power, only if you want to drive radiators from a back boiler inside that thing, which you can get as an option. You have to have a circulating pump to push the water through forward of the boat to get your radiators hot. But that is an amazing thing, and it's got a little metering device, and it's so reliable. And everybody has those. Plus, it has a hot plate, so we can cook on it, boil water, keep a kettle ticking over, that type of thing. And then in addition to that, we've got a Basto unit, which we only use up in the fore part of the vessel for a drying room, because that's a very hot, effective blow type system that will keep things super hot for a short period of time. We use that to dry kit. So, and again, it's sort of a backup.
So Simon has asked, have you ever been iced up when strong winds have hit? And how do you cope with iced up control systems?
Well, as you saw in that video, when you get to that stage, which was an extreme example, it's very difficult to keep up with it. And you got to be very careful not getting involved in a situation like that with a big headwind and a head sea, because then you run into stability problems with icing higher aloft. And you know, there's no way you can keep these systems, your furlers and your winches clear. So you've got to be tactically. We were running into South Georgia. We knew what the weather was going to do. We were getting good intel on the weather, so we knew we'd make it to the island, and we had 3 reefs and a staysail up. So that was pretty good for anything the wind was going to throw at us. So yeah, I don't have an answer to that question.
But like anything else, it's just about being as prepared as you can be, I suppose.
Yeah, head in the right direction. And, you know, we had a collection of wooden mallets. Half a dozen wooden mallets are handy to be able to de-ice by hand as much as you can as you go. And a big bag of rock salt is often handy when you get in these situations. I've lost your screen, by the way. Yeah.
Pardon?
I've lost the screen for some reason, but you can still hear me, right?
I can still hear you. Yeah, I can still hear you.
Yeah.
We've got another question here. I'm sure somebody's typing the names wrong, but it says Wrongvold. He's from Wrongvold. Apologies if I'm pronouncing these wrong, everyone. They've asked if you could have only one electronic instrument, which would you choose from? Radar, depth, or GPS?
Yeah, that's a good one, and I'd go for you know, GPS is great, and you know, with a software package for plotting, etc. You know, absolutely reliable offshore. When you get inshore in remote places, it becomes very unreliable. So in those situations, I often rely on depth and radar for distance off, and depth, obviously, the most important one. And really, GPS becomes less important. But, you know, GPS and plotters are great for doing transoceanic passages and doing, you know, when you're way offshore, just to keep track of where you are. But once you go inshore, again, as I said before, you've got to revert back to fundamental principles. Observation is one, and stick to something like radar, which gives you a true distance off and your depth.
Brilliant. Thank you, Skip. Devala has asked, how many people do you consider necessary for minimum crew?
Well, on my little boat, we have 2 professional crew, and on the big boat, 3. And that seems to do it. Because don't forget, you know, all our guests who come on board, or science teams or film teams, they all pitch in and help running the boat, you know, include, you know, washing up, cooking, launching the dinghy, sailing, that type of thing. So, you know, probably on a 74-footer, you know, a classic luxury charter boat, you'd probably need 4. You know, you'd need somebody dishing out the cocktails and washing the dishes after dinner, you know, which we never have a problem there. But they fight to get in the galley to do the dishes on my boat.
Brilliant. So a question from James says, will Vincent's of Antarctica have electronic or all manual pumps? Will it have dual electronic navigation systems, paper charts, or both?
Definitely paper charts everywhere we go, no doubt. The pump story, that's interesting because I had a bit of a battle. I wanted to keep the pretty much manual pumps all around the boat. Plus, we got a very good bilge pumping system off a PTO off one of the engines to pump every compartment. But the toilet story, I got defeated on that one. We have electric toilets and all that type of thing, which I was not keen on, and I had to give way on that one. But the one good thing is on this boat, I will not be fixing the toilets if they have a problem. It's somebody else's job.
That leads very nicely onto the next question. Good segue. Anne wants to know, where do you dispose of your waste?
Depends on where we go, but you know, all the sensitive areas we go to, Antarctica, South Georgia, etc. Obviously, we have to bring everything, all the dry waste back to shore. So you have to, you know, on a boat like ours, we have a provision now on the new boat. We have deck lockers for dry waste and wet waste. Everything has to go back to point of departure and disposed of there. Vegetable waste and galley waste and things like that. In the Antarctic, we keep everything on board in 60-liter barrels. Comes out of the galley, out of a gash bucket in the galley, goes into these barrels, sealed up. when they're full, and that gets disposed of offshore when we're north of the Antarctic convergence, for example, and the same in South Georgia. So we actually do better than the MARPOL regs in many cases with our self-regulatory philosophies in the Antarctic Tour Operators Association.
We've had a really lovely question I've seen just pop up. I think it might be really difficult to choose just one, but someone's asked, what is your happiest memory of your expeditions over the years?
Somebody asked me that on a previous webinar, and I think the best answer to that is every time you set off on one of these expeditions, it's probably my happiest moment of, after all the planning you do to get to that stage of actually leaving the dock. And nowadays, permitting and due diligences and risk assessments, and my God, the amount of work I do to get to the point of being able to do this stuff nowadays is huge. And just setting off, going out through the heads, you're in charge of the project, and that is happy moment every time. And of course, when you get to the other end, when you get to South Georgia, it's actually getting off the boat and going up in the mountains. That's another stage of that process of breaking the connection to the yacht and getting on shore and doing my mountaineering, which I'm passionate about still.
Amazing. I suppose that feeling of just setting off, knowing that all that adventure's ahead and all the setup's gone well.
Exactly. Yeah, it's all in the planning.
That leads me on to another question then. Given the past year, in and out of lockdowns, how has that affected you personally? Have you faced any challenges or have you learned anything from it?
Well, we've survived very well simply by being in Cape Town. The whole charter business in the South American sector is dead. All my colleagues and the cruise ships and everybody in the Tour Operators Association have done nothing, zeroed out, where by being in Cape Town, I've picked up some amazing special projects. We've been to Marion Island, supporting a UK film team and taking some government personnel down there to man the station, South African territory. And we just finished now the second of 2 trips to Gough Island. If anybody wants to Google the RSPB, Royal Society for Protection of Birds, you'll bring up their mice eradication project on Gough, and we took down a Vanguard team, 15 people and 2.5 tons of cargo, including bird seed, long story. Brought them down to Gough, which is about 1,500 miles from Cape Town, southwest of Cape Town, and deposited them. And then an icebreaker, Agulhas, goes down in May with the helicopters to bombard the island with poison to try to flush out the mice, and killed a lot. So we've been, and those 4 voyages have kept us going right from September. And I'm starting the second trip to Marion to recover the film team next week and their cargo. And but this is, having said all this, this is every time you set off, we had to have a 2-week quarantine in a hotel, COVID tests. I'm actually having a COVID test as soon as I finish this talk for the next trip. So a lot more rigmarole, but I have to say that we survived better than most by being in the right place in the right time in South Africa.
Yeah, it sounds like you've had lots of adventures. So this is a final question then, Skip, and then we're going to move on. From Kodrat, have you ever tried any solar energy-based systems to generate electricity? And if you have, were you happy with them?
No, I haven't, because we've never, the boats we've designed, there's never been enough area to support a solar system array. And at the end of the day, on a charter boat, you're using so much power anyway with 12, 13 people on board. And you will have to run the generator. There's no way out of that one. I mean, on the other hand, if you're cruising with a couple or that type of thing, or solo sailing, obviously this is the way to go: wind machines, solar, hydrogen. But even on Vincent of Antarctica, we haven't gone that alternative route just because the power demands are going to be quite huge in what we do. Still relying on the fuel.
Sorry, Skip. Thank you so much. That, you'll be pleased to know, that's the end of the questions. Thank you so much, Skip. What an inspirational talk. And
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us all the way from South Africa between your expeditions. We really, really appreciate it, and we wish you good sailing And I'm very much looking forward to a cup of tea with you in Hamble in May, just down the road.
Absolutely. Do right. Thank you. Thanks to
Thank
the
you.
RYA.